Let's spin the wheel. 100-second spin. Oh man, the wheel of fate is turning once more. Rebel 2 action. Oh man, I sure hope we get the option I want. I hope so too. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, well, the spin's not done yet. This is close. You're sweating. Oh, well, ah! I did that to myself. All right. So, whew. Okay. So here we are at long last. Marvel vs. Capcom 4. For those of you just joining, over the past few months, or the past half year or so, really, I've been doing a variety of hypothetical versus Capcom roster building exercises. Um, when I started, I didn't think that Marvel and Capcom would ever collaborate again, so I kind of scoffed at the idea of a Marvel versus Capcom roster, and and never really tried to build a new one. But then the Marvel vs. Capcom collection got announced, and suddenly all this hope for maybe another MVC game coming out someday just swelled up within me. So I put together a Marvel vs. Capcom roster. Most of my speculative rosters have a very reserved base roster size, and then also kind of a realistic DLC roster size. However, my argument for Marvel vs. Capcom 4 is that if Marvel and Capcom do decide to make it, they know that they have to provide a mea culpa for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. They know they have to um they kind of have to get people excited. They have to justify themselves again. They have to show people know, like, look, this one has a lot of content. This one has a lot of characters. Like, we know you guys did not like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite's 30 character roster. We know you didn't like all the cuts we made. Um this roster is a nice big one to start. Uh please come back, right? So uh yeah, so as opposed to my 30 character base rosters uh that I usually do, Marvel's Capcom 4 will have um will have a 44 character base roster, 22 characters on each side, and then 3 seasons of 6 character DLC. Um uh and for those of you at home that are as good at doing math as me, that will be a 62 character final roster. After after like 3 or 4 years of DLC, basically. Um, yeah, and yeah, so each roster that I do has guidelines that I've come up with. What I think the kind of game plan for each collaboration will be like. And this is me thinking, like, if Marvel and Capcom made a new Marvel vs. Capcom game, what roster would they put together? This isn't a dream roster. This isn't what I want. This is what do I think they would come up with. So, the guidelines. I think it'd be a 3 versus 3 format. They did 2v2 for Infinite, and then Infinite did badly, so I think they're gonna do a lot of going back to what they think people liked about MVC3. So I think they will go back, begrudgingly go back to the 3 versus 3 format. And in the same vein, I think the key mechanic will be it'll kind of be a riff on X Factor, but be a bit more balanced. It'll be a little bit less skewed towards towards like, oh, you have one character left and you pop X Factor, you'll be unstoppable. It'll be a bit more balanced than that, but it'll be kind of similar to X Factor. It'll be it'll be you giving yourself an attack and health boost at a time of your choosing during the match. The character guidelines for the Marvel vs. Capcom 4 roster is to celebrate the history of Marvel vs. Capcom. So like Infinite did not celebrate the history of Marvel vs. Capcom. Infinite was an ad for the MCU uh that had less Capcom characters than Marvel characters in it. Um and and I think MBC4 will be, amongst other things, but there will be a big emphasis on it being a Marvel vs. Capcom game for Marvel vs. Capcom fans. It will also take advantage of lifted restrictions. What that means is that when Infinite came out, X-Men were off the table. Doctor Doom and Fox owned characters were off the table. Because the merger and stuff hadn't been finalized yet at the time that the roster was starting to be built. That finally, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, so those restrictions are no longer in place for Marvel games, right? X-Men can be there, Fantastic Four characters can be there. Um, you know, so this roster will take advantage of lifted restrictions. Um, and now that there's not really a lot of legal issues with using a variety of Marvel characters, this will go hog wild in that respect. And but that doesn't mean there won't be any marketing. Like obviously, Marvel will still want to showcase characters that are relevant in their current projects. So there will be some marketing, but there'll also be fan favorites, like characters that Capcom fans want and like. Um, that Capcom and Marvel vs. Capcom fans want and like. So, um, that's the setup. That's what we're starting with. I don't know if these guidelines are even visible. But yeah, let's time to do this big ass roster. Let's get started. So I guess I have a lot of characters to go through. So I'm just gonna kind of rapid fire some of the no duh characters without too much elaboration or explanation. So um so for starters, no duh. No duh. Obviously, obviously, obviously. Ryu, obviously. So give me a second to kind of line this up in the box perfectly as possible while still Yeah, that'll. I guess that'll do. Um. Here, I continue with the no duh options. No duh. Chun Li from Street Fighter. No duh. Um. And then, of course, Morrigan. No duh. No duh. Morrigan. From Darkstalkers. Um. Yeah, let's get some. All right, and yeah, if you're just jumping into this one, um, this roster will also have two boss characters, two playable boss characters, one on each side. Um, that will kind of combine and collaborate to create an unplayable final boss at the end of the story mode. Um, and I generally save those boss characters for the end or near the end, but I forgot to bring that up. I like to bring it up near the beginning, and I forgot. So let's see. Let's get some no does on the Marvel side. Captain America. No duh. Right? Yeah, like I think Captain America coming back is pretty obvious. Um let's get another no duh on the Marvel side of the board. Iron Man. No duh. Gotta get Robert on to the field. And obviously, he will not be voiced by Robert Downey Jr., but he will be voiced by the Robert Downey Jr. impersonator that voices him in Midnight Suns and shit. Um, and let me get another no duh out here. Hulk, obviously Hulk. Yeah, Hulk's a pretty obvious staple to Marvel things and also to Capcom's Marvel fighting games. So yeah, get Hulk on the board. He gets to do Hulk shit for sure. For sure. Gotta have Hulk on the board doing Hulk shit. Um, all right, yeah, we have some of our most obvious ones out on the board right now. Where should I go from here? Should I fill out? Should I fill out Street Fighter and Darkstalkers? Should I fill out Avengers or should I bounce around like franchises slash series a bit more? Okay, I'm gonna fill out these rows. I'm gonna fill out these rows. Um so first on the Capcom side, our first new character um would be new to versus Capcom, would be her debut in the versus Capcom franchise. Not necessarily new if you've been watching me do my versus Capcom rosters, which I've done 8 of so far. This is my ninth. Um and I do like to include this character in my rosters just because I think she's such a good fit for versus Capcom, and that's Kimberly from Street Fighter 6. Uh yeah, I've said this a few times before at this point, but I think she has one of the best designs in the Street Fighter franchise. I think her moveset is great, and I think it's exactly the kind of moveset that they could really elaborate on and escalate in a versus Capcom game. You know how like Ryu has his fireballs in Street Fighter, but they become fucking laser beams in versus Capcom games. I think they could similarly make her just such a wacky, crazy character in a versus Capcom game. So Kimberly is the first new blood to get put into Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Um, and then the remaining Darkstalkers rep um, to put in Marvel vs. Capcom 4 would be Jeddah from from Darkstalkers. He showed up in uh in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and that was just a really bad place for him to get his first Marvel vs. Capcom showing. You know, so I feel like his appearance in MVC4 could be kind of a redemption for Jeddah. It could be it could be him getting to make like a comeback. You know, it could be him getting like kind of his moveset revisited and him getting to be in a game that's good. Um, so yeah. So not actually not a new character, technically a returning character, but I think this could give the character some new life, you know? Um and then there are more Avengers, but I think I'm going to put those Avengers on the second row. The characters that I'll the other characters I'll put on the first row um are a couple characters that are a big deal to Marvel. And also kind of here's a no duh character for you. Spider-Man. Spider-Man no duh. Um, yeah, I mean, what do I fucking say about Spider-Man being in Marvel vs. Capcom game? I bet you didn't guess this was gonna happen. Oh, it's Spider-Man. Yeah, still kind of speed running some of these choices, but you know, yeah. What do you fucking want me to say, man? Spider-Man. Yeah, Spider-Man's gonna be in Marvel vs. Capcom 4, but I have another new character that has not been in a versus Capcom game before on the Marvel side as a Spider-Man rep. As the Green Goblin. Um, Yeah, I think he could be a really cool versus Capcom character. Honestly, like he could, uh, he could be on his glider. He could do like cool like traps and zoning shit with his pumpkin bombs and stuff. Can like charge you with the glider, like impale you with the glider. Uh, and yeah, like Spider Man is overdue for some reps to the franchise that aren't just him and Venom. Um, so so yeah, Green Goblin I think is kind of the best pick for like a Spider-Man villain that can show up. Um, but yeah, one more thing I should probably say about Spider-Man is I so Spider-Man and Green Goblin are the two Spider-Man reps for the base roster. Um, and I thought about putting Miles Morales in the game, but I think I decided is that Marvel and Capcom would probably not put Miles Morales in the game as his own playable slot. I think one thing Capcom views as very important is kind of readability of character models and stuff, right? And I think one problem with Miles and Peter is that their silhouettes are too similar. Um, and in a game with a lot of alternate costume colors and stuff, what they will want to avoid is a situation where someone is playing as Miles and their opponent thinks that they're fighting Peter and comes up with the wrong strategy before Miles Morales specific stuff starts happening to them. They really want to avoid that kind of frustrating moment in game, right? Um so I think while they would not make Miles Morales his own character slot, one thing I think would be in Marvel vs. Capcom is is this thing that I'm calling multiverse costumes, where basically certain characters would get alternate costumes uh that are functionally the same mechanically, um, but completely change like the voice actors and dialogue of the character, completely changes their character model, changes the animations of some of their moves um while keeping like the hitboxes and move properties intact, and also completely changing um, the cinematic animation for their level 3 super. So like whatever the startup animation that like lands the hit will be the same, but then for example, uh, like um, like Peter Parker Spider Man will will have a level 3 super where he swings a train into you or something after doing an initial push animation. Um, but the his Miles Morales multiverse costume, Miles Morales will do the initial push, um, but then uh like Venom blasts you so hard that you see your skeleton, like the animation, like the cinematic is completely different because the cinematic gets to be completely different. You can change the cinematic without altering any of the gameplay. Um and yeah, that's the way I think they'll tackle it. Um so I think Miles Morales will not get his own character slot, but he will be a very of like a very overhauled costume for Spider-Man that is so overhauled that he feels like a different character in some ways. And similarly, maybe Green Goblin could get like Hobgoblin as a multiverse costume or something. Yeah, there's a lot of multiverse costume like uh potential, I think. And some Capcom characters will get that too. Like Ryu's default form is like him as a Street Fighter 6 like older, more wiser form. But a multiverse costume of his would be a younger, like like Street Fighter 4 era Ryu, where like he's still having trouble with the Satsui no Hado, so like his supers are like less tranquil and more violent, you know, but still mechanically the same. Anyway, that's my thought. Um, Sorry if it's dumb. I feel like maybe that's a decent compromise. And yes, Green Goblin. Green Goblin in the roster, baby. All right. Well, I think I want to put some characters in row 2, so let's get some more Avengers characters out here. Um uh some Avengers that are maybe a little less obvious, but probably not like the most shocking, right? So first up, Doctor Strange. I think he's really earned his spot. He's been in the last couple. Um, he's really important in Marvel stuff right now. He has a really cool move set in Marvel vs. Capcom. So I think Doctor Strange gets to keep sticking around. Um, Also, this might be kind of a no duh, but I feel like no one really got to experience this character because by the time the DLC came out for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, no one was playing that game anymore. Um, and that's Black Panther, T'Challa. Uh, yeah, Black Panther absolutely deserves to be in any modern iteration of a versus Capcom game. I think. Um, and it'd be an opportunity to give him like a brand new move set uh because Infinite basically just gave him a bunch of Wolverine's moves because Wolverine wasn't in Infinite. Uh and who's to say who's gonna be in Marvel vs. Capcom 4? But but yeah, I think they can kind of revamp T'Challa's moveset and make him feel more cool and unique. Also, I guess a multiverse costume for him could be Shuri's version of Black Panther. Um, so you even get another female character in the roster, sort of, kinda. Um, then Captain Marvel. Uh, I guess this is I guess this is kind of the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite characters that should get a second chance row. um, but yeah, I think they'd bring Captain Marvel back. Obviously, um, Marvel keeps trying to get Captain Marvel to be a big deal, and like, uh, it feels like they're getting diminishing returns on that. But she's still a cool character. Um, and yeah, I think she should get another shot, especially for one reason. Here's our last Avengers character in the base roster. You know, and maybe of calling them an Avengers character is a bit of a stretch, but this character has been an Avenger, and I feel like this character is being ramped up to become an Avenger in the MCU. That's Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan. Yeah, I love Kamala. You know, I think she's a great character. I loved her MCU series. Um, and yeah, she's great. I think you know, she's been revamped in the comics to have her kind of MCU power set. So yeah, so in this fighting game, she would also kind of have her MCU power set, making holograms or whatever, and like controlling the holograms. Um, constructs, I think, right? Like constructs that also give her like hands and stuff, like the big rocky hands. Yeah, she definitely has the potential for a cool fighting game moveset, and I think she's kind of a shoe in to become a Marvel vs. Capcom character. Ms. Marvel has the potential to have very satisfying combos. Yeah, I think so too. I think Ms. Marvel really needs to be a versus Capcom character. So I put her in here. Here she is. Um and yeah, that's the Avengers. But boy, there's so many Marvel characters besides the Avengers. But I should probably put some I should probably stick some Capcom characters on the other side here. So let's try that. Yeah, let's get a big boy Capcom franchise out here. Um Leon Kennedy. Yeah, we got to get some Resident Evil in there. And yeah, I feel like Leon Kennedy is the vibe for MVC4, you know? Um yeah, instead of Chris, I think Leon should really get the spotlight, and I think he could have a cool move set. And and yeah, like I always thought Leon was a cool design, you know, and I think he should get the spotlight here. Um as should our next you know, like Leon Kennedy has never been in a Marvel versus in a versus Capcom game before. So this would be a great opportunity to put him in. Similarly, Dimitrescu is another new representative, a new rep. Um, I think she's shown up in almost all of my versus Capcom rosters, if not all of them. Uh, but listen, she's just gonna be an incredible fighting game character. I can feel it in my bones. And yeah, like uh really, it's amazing that Leon hasn't had fighting game representation considering he's up there suplexing and roundhouse kicking his Las Plagas in Spain. Yeah, God, he'd have such a cool moveset that wouldn't even have that much overlap with Chris. Um, but don't worry, we would have a rep from games that Chris is in. Um, and that's Wesker. Yeah, got to put Wesker back. It's weird. I'm pretty sure Wesker wasn't in MVC Infinite, and that's crazy. Like his moveset in MVC3 was so cool, you know? Like, yeah. So I think they really have to remedy that by bringing him back for MVC4. So he's not the boss character, but he is here. Um, and then while we're looking at kind of uh characters made in that Resident Evil engine with like guns and that kind of whole like vibe. Um, let's get Regina Dino Crisis out here. Base roster, baby. I yeah, I think they'd really market her as like, it's like, look, Regina's back, and stick her in the base roster and make that really exciting. I think uh I think they could even potentially kind of watch the reaction to her inclusion in Marvel vs. Capcom 4 to see whether or not they should bother to do more Dino Crisis shit. Um, but yeah, put Regina in kind of the Resident Evil row as kind of like their cousin. Um, all right, 9 characters on each side already. Sorry if you guys can hear the horse upstairs. Mm. Yeah, I think I see what I'll do. So this second row on the Capcom side will be the shooting zombies and other creatures with guns row. So in the last slot for that, um, we will put Frank West. Uh, yeah, I said this recently, and I guess I'll say it here since this is probably gonna be its own video. Um, I didn't think like when I started this series, I didn't think that Dead Rising would ever be paid attention to again. I thought Capcom was going to silently shelve the franchise and stop trying to make Frank West work. And then I made some rosters, and after that, they revealed another Dead Rising remaster project with Frank West in it. So here's Frank West. He's gonna be in every game until I fucking die. There he is, rounding out the zombie and dinosaur fighting Capcom team. And I'm out of Avenger characters in the base roster, but let's put an Avengers adjacent character at the end of the second row. And Green Goblin's at the end of the first row, so let's put another villain right underneath him. Thanos. Um, yeah, Thanos is technically a returning character. He's been in MVC. He's been in Marvel superheroes. He's been in MVC 2. He's been in Infinite. Um, and he was kind of disappointing in Infinite, but I think that's partially why he should kind of come back and not be the main villain, but be present and be kind of a threat. You know. and make his moveset cool again. Give him a cool moveset again. Pretty please. Okay. Um I've been holding off, but I think it's time. Um the elephant in the room, the heartbreaking absence from the most recent Marvel vs. Capcom game. It's time to put some X-Men reps on the board. So now that we know the X-Men are going to be back, let's get the no-does out of the way. No-duh. Wolverine is obviously the very first pick to like bring back the X-Men, right? No-duh. And then no-duh, like Storm was a staple of of all the Capcom made Marvel fighting games up until she wasn't allowed to be included in Infinite. I think she was in all of them. Um Maybe she wasn't in the first Marvel vs. Capcom, but I think she was even in that. Um so like yeah, this is one that they kind of no questions asked have to bring back. So yeah, bring back Storm. Um and then probably yeah, just get the third no duh out on the field. Magneto, right? Uh the subject of the characters as functions interview where Combo Fiend was like, you guys don't need Magneto. You just need a guy with an 8-way air dash. No, it turns out that people needed Magneto. So, like, yeah, he's coming back in MVC4, no questions asked, in all his glory. Yeah, like, these three kind of need to come back for Marvel and Capcom to recover, like, any goodwill. And they're going to make a big deal out of it. There's going to be a big trailer that shows the three of them. Maybe they're just all three of them are just in the first reveal trailer for the game. Just be like, look, they're back. Please, please have some faith in us again. They're back. Um, but yeah, then let's get some less obvious but still important um X-Men reps onto the table. Where are they? They. It's about time to brain fart, Daniel. Okay. Yeah. Up next, Cyclops. Now it's funny because I think Cyclops is all you have to do is look at the Marvel vs. Capcom collection, like box art and key art, uh, to see that Capcom and Marvel now acknowledge that Cyclops is one of like the biggest, most iconic faces of the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise, right? You see Cyclops and Ryu just fucking dapping it up uh on like the cover art, and yeah, it becomes obvious that Cyclops has to be back in the base roster if they ever do another Marvel vs. Capcom game. Like he was absent for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, both iterations of it, and then he was obviously absent for Infinite. So I think it would be like particularly hype inducing if they're like, "Hey guys, Cyclops is back." Um yeah. Yeah, they'll yeah. Yep. Yeah, Cyclops in the base roster and they'll make a big deal out of it and it'll be great. And then fucking Optic Blast being all over ranked will make the game so annoying that I'll probably only play it for 2 weeks, but it'll be a great 2 weeks. Um and up next, Deadpool. Like there were a lot of iterations of this roster where I just had him as DLC. He was always in the roster, but there was one point where he was DLC instead of in the base roster. But after thinking about it for a while, I realized he kind of had to be in the base roster. Um, he's too important to like there's saving characters for DLC because you know that your fans will buy the character. And then there's just kind of like manipulative cynicism, right? There's just kind of like this character should be in the base roster, but we're gonna make you pay for him, right? And I don't think Capcom and this particularly Marvel, I don't think either of them are above that, but I do think they realize that making Deadpool DLC is one of those DLC picks where people will buy him, but they'll be angry about it. Like they'll be like, why didn't you put him in the base roster? Like that's that's one where they'll kind of get in trouble for making him DLC almost. So I think they'll put him in the base roster and just have people be really happy to see him in the base roster. And he was great in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, man. He was such a fun character in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And Marvel and Capcom know that, so he'll be back using like swinging around health bars as a super and all that fun shit. Talk about how Marvel's back, baby, all that shit. Um, and we've got a lot of returning X-Men characters. Celebrate history, Marvel vs. Capcom. Uh, bring back fan favorites. That's really important. But we need at least one like new rep, right? We need at least one new X-Men character. So we do have one new X-Men character in the base roster, and that's Scarlet Witch. Um, Marvel's most marketed X-Men character, partially because they were pretending she wasn't an X-Man uh for like the last 10 years. But yeah, I think Scarlet Witch is uh I think she'd make an incredible fighting game character. I think she could have such a fun and cool move set. Um and she's actually made cameos. Like I was playing the collection last night and I think she made a cameo in like X-Men versus Street Fighter or something. Um Yeah, she they should absolutely like kind of upgrade her to a playable character and yeah, she'd have an amazing move set. She's she's an important heavily marketed character right now. I think it just makes a lot of sense to make her to put her in as a new MVC character. Right. So let's get some so the X-Men. Let's get some Capcom characters on the board. Capcom side is looking a little lonely. So yeah, we have some big Capcom franchises missing. So let's start fixing that a little bit. Dante. Dante's a no duh. Like obviously Dante's going to be on there. Dante has been a Marvel vs. Capcom staple. Like, he's only been in the franchise since 3, but I think he is going to be an MVC staple from now on. I think he's going to be unless they really shit the bed with the Devil May Cry franchise at some point. I think he's going to be in every MVC game as long as the franchise exists. Um and as a new Devil May Cry rep, I think they will also bring in Nero. He's very important to the franchise right now. I think he'd have a great move set. I think he'd be a lot of fun. So yeah, I think they'll definitely put him in for sure. Um, this seems to be the cool guys with swords row so far. Um, so let's put the Monster Hunter on the board. I think this is the first time I've just put the Monster Hunter instead of a monster from Monster Hunter in the roster. But yeah, Monster Hunter would be a returning character, right? Like they put the Monster Hunter in Infinite and then the game ended. So I think they kind of owe it to MVC fans to kind of put the Monster Hunter back in this game. So that's what's happening there. And yeah, then let's get some important characters on the bottom row also. Also, all three of these are kind of no does, but that means we should get them on the table, right? Mega Man Classic, no duh. I've always loved Mega Man Classics uh Marvel versus Capcom move set, So like just yeah, bring him back. He hasn't been back in a while. Like he didn't put him in MVC3 at all. You replaced him with X in MVCI. Yeah, just bring back the original little blue boy, right? Bring him back. Bring him back. Redemption of Monster Hunter, yeah, it's a necessity. It's important. Um yeah, because if you want to represent Mega Man X, you already have a perfectly fine character to do that with, and that's Zero. So yeah, bring Zero back, no duh. Absolute no duh inclusion. Bring back Zero. And speaking of a no dub, bring back this Mega Man character, Tronbon. She's great. Her serve bots are great. Fun move set, unique move set. Um, yeah, and I think this makes for a very good trio of Mega Man characters. You know, Mega Man Zero and Tronbon. They've never, all three of them have never been in the same game before. So that'd be nice, and have them like interact with each other in the story. I think that'd be fun. All right, so there's 4 squares left per side, but remember, this is going to be a 44 character roster. I'm gonna put a couple. I'm gonna put a couple characters in the middle each, and those will be kind of like story important characters, I guess. Um, but yeah, let's fill in these remaining squares here. So there's a couple of important Marvel stuff that hasn't been represented yet. Um, yeah, in this day and age, you got to have Guardians of the Galaxy stuff in any Marvel crossover game, right? So yeah, Rocket Raccoon is obviously back. Um, I thought it was pretty cool that Groot was part of his moveset in Infinite. So even though Infinite did a lot of stuff badly, I think Rocket Raccoon would have Groot in his moveset here also. Um, and then Gamora. Gamora was another character that was a very good idea to put in a Marvel vs. Capcom game, and she just got put in the wrong one. So this time she can get put in the right one. Um, and yeah, because there's gonna be Guardians characters. Like that's it's got to be a mix of marketing and fan favorite. So the marketing is definitely there's gonna be some Guardians in there. But yeah, I think Rocket and Gamora are very good picks for the for Guardians reps in the base roster. Um, and then let's see the um on the Capcom side. Um, we got Arthur mostly because they love putting Arthur in versus Capcom games these days, like in especially in Marvel versus Capcom games. Like yeah, I didn't really expect him to come back for Infinite, and he did, and I feel like he'll just keep coming back. It's kind of like their fun, quirky little retro rep. I think they'll keep putting him in these. Um, but then on the side of returning characters that should come back and that we want to come back for the Capcom side, Phoenix Wright. Kind of breaking the knights and characters with swords thing on this row, but whatever. Yeah, bring back Phoenix Wright. Yeah, he has one of the coolest fighting game movesets of all time. You really should bring him back. Um, and and finally, there are 4 slots left on the base roster per character. Let's not forget. Let's remember. So on the Marvel side, there are some major omissions still. Um, we have we have Avengers, we have X-Men, we have Spider-Man stuff, we've got Guardians, but there's one thing on the marketing side we're absolutely going to be getting more of in the future. There's definitely a Marvel franchise they're going to want to showcase in this game, and that is the Fantastic Four. So Mr. Fantastic will be in, and I think he could actually be a pretty fun character. Um, he I think with his long limbs he can be pretty fun, kind of like mid-range grappler kind of deal. Um, and he can do all kinds of funky stuff with all of his stretchy powers. One fun thing I think is he could have kind of like a counter move where like he like expands his chest, and if you hit him while it's expanded, you just fall into Mr. Fantastic and you get like trapped in his skin basically. Which sounds disgusting, but I think they could make it funny. Um yeah, so Mr. Fantastic. I think Mr. Fantastic could be so fun. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope this roster is readable because I have most of the base roster done already. Um, it is readable. Hell yeah. Uh, um, and then also, so yeah, Mr. Fantastic is new to Marvel vs. Capcom, obviously, and also new to Marvel vs. Capcom. Haha, you are trapped in my skin. Yeah, that's what Mr. Fantastic would say. That's the voice clip. Also new. Where is she? There she is. There she is. Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, would also get added. Um, because she has so many more cool powers than just turning invisible. Obviously she'd probably get to turn invisible. Um, but like her force field gimmick could make for such cool and such annoying fighting game moves. Um, like using like force pushes to kind of knock you down. um she can kind of give herself flight. Yeah, she's got a lot of cool moveset potential actually. um and while I thought about Thing or Johnny, I think she'd be a cool surprise pick. um okay, so we're down to the last base roster characters. Well, not the last because each side will get two that I'm putting in the center. 44 character base roster. Um, and yeah, some of these picks don't like. I feel like as far as weirdo picks, you know, MVC like the Marvel side especially kind of lacking. It's all a bunch of like some of them are kind of like fun and funny. I don't think any of them are like truly weird. It's kind of the cost of having a roster that covers so many bases, I guess. But on the Capcom side, we've got Strider Hiryu. Um, yeah, you know him, you love him. Put him in the base roster, and you instantly you regain a lot of goodwill with versus Capcom fans. So he's kind of a must. Um, and on the Capcom side, probably the closest thing I have to a weirdo pick. Initially, I put Beautiful Joe on there, but I thought that we needed more like new characters. Um, we needed more like brand new characters in the base roster. So I replaced Beautiful Joe with a different uh red goofy superhero boy with a tokusatsu aesthetic. And that's Falcon from Power Stone. Um yeah, Falcon initially kind of starts as the guy on the right. And then as he fights, he collects stones that eventually transform him into the robot guy on the left. And I think, yeah, I think that has the potential to be a great Marvel vs. Capcom moveset. Um, as kind of this momentum character, where you have to do moves to get stones, and then once you get all the stones, you are exceptionally powerful. Kind of like Phoenix Wright, but less silly, I guess. Not a lot less silly, but still probably less silly. Um, yeah, it's funny, whenever I looked at Power Stone characters, I always kind of dismiss Falcon because his main form looks kind of generic, but his robot form and turns out like kind of the moves that he has as a result are actually kind of iconic. He's actually kind of cool. So so yeah, Falcon in the base roster. And Beautiful Joe kind of remains abandoned, unfortunately. I I had made an icon for Beautiful Joe and everything. Like here he is. I guess that's your first bit of cut content. Um but anyway, uh still still more base roster characters before we get to DLC. And these are the characters that I feel are like kind of like major characters like okay, so first on the Marvel side, a character that I'll consider kind of a mini boss. Um right? He's not the main boss character, but he will be a major antagonist and like a major threat to the heroic characters in the story. And that's Loki. Um yeah, God. I think he'd have such a cool fighting game move set. He'd be such a pain in the ass to fight. He'd be so fun to play as. And yeah, obviously he'd have a lot of story importance. Um, you'll notice that I did not put Thor in the base roster. He's not in the DLC either. My justification for that is so Thor in Marvel vs. Capcom, unfortunately, has never been very fun to play, and he's never been very popular. Like I feel like they made him a little cooler in Infinite, but he's still like kind of bottom tier, and not a lot of people are interested in playing as him. So what I would do for Marvel vs. Capcom 4 is that Thor would be in the story mode, but basically he would get kidnapped by Loki kind of early in the story and be incapacitated for the entire thing. Um like, he would like help the heroes, but he would be like too worn out by Loki's magic to like join the main battle, and that's how they would justify not making Thor playable. And then people would spend the next like 3 years of DLC being like, "Ooh, they're gonna make Thor DLC," and then they never do. Like, like honestly, I feel like that's incredibly in character for Capcom. Loki would be a blast. Excellent pick. Yeah, I thank you. I Loki would definitely be a character that I'd look at to see if I would be capable of maining him. I'd really love Loki to be in an MVC game. So so yeah, Loki. And then on the Capcom side, not so much a mini boss, but like a major driving force of the story would be Ruby Hart. Um she was she was a big deal. Like, she was an original character made for MVC2. Or at least MVC2 was her first appearance. Um and she was basically like the only semblance of the game's story. Like, she was picking up heroes on her pirate ship to help her fight Abyss. Um, so I think making her a major proponent of the story this time and like bringing her back after she's been gone for so long would be a pretty cool nod to Marvel vs. Capcom's history. So yeah, Ruby Hart and Loki is kind of key players in the whole thing. And then finally our boss characters. If you are a Marvel vs. Capcom fan, you may have noticed that I've gotten a lot of the Marvel fan favorites back. But there's one major MVC character that I haven't brought back in, and that's because he is going to be the boss character. He's going to be the biggest threat on the Marvel side. And that is Doctor Doom. So so yeah, I had Doctor Doom back in the roster, right? Like, he was like when I was first building the Marvel vs. Capcom roster. Um he was in the roster, but just like, just a character in the roster. Um the Then after I made the first version of the roster and put it into OBS, um uh Robert Downey Jr. as Doom got announced. Like Avengers Doomsday got announced after I made my first version of the roster. So then I realized, fuck, like Doom would probably be the main villain in this too. So I moved some stuff around. And yeah, Doom's the main villain in this. So I caused this. No, Doom was initially not the big bad boss of this game. But now he is. Now he is, because that's what Marvel and Capcom would do. And it actually would be kind of fun to see like Doom be such a big threat in the story mode. I think they could make it really cool. Um and honestly, the boss on the Capcom side is probably the weirdest character in the base roster, because I think it's going to make the majority of the people that play it, especially if this game comes out in like 4 or 5 years, you know, it's going to make the majority of the people that play it go, huh? What? um, who? And I'll tell you who. Uh, and that is the Behemoth slash the final form of Leviathan, from the hit Capcom game that everyone's played, Exo Primal. um, so Exo Primal is, if you've already forgotten what Exo Primal is, it's this game that they did a lot of marketing and push for like last year, where it's like kind of a PvE that turns into PvP kind of game, where you're a bunch of like robot soldiers fighting swarms of dinosaurs that have entered the planet through like time anomalies and shit. Um, the sentient AI mastermind Leviathan is the one that's bringing all these dinosaurs in through time rifts, and then eventually he pilots his own robot exosuit to challenge you once and for all, called the Behemoth. Um, Sorry for the Exoprimal spoilers. I feel like not a lot of people are going to care about Extra Primal spoilers, but I am sorry to bring. I'm sorry to thrust this upon you. If if you're one of those people, I'm sorry to not think about that right away. Wow, shaking my head. These spoilers. Um, and yeah, so I think Behemoth, this cool robot exosuit thing, would be a cool fighting game character, and also uh um in the story, I feel like Behemoth and Doctor Doom uh would team up, and that Doom would eventually betray Behemoth and use Behemoth's like AI, use Leviathan's AI to enhance his Doom bots basically, and just open all these rifts and like swarm you with Doom bots. Um so I think even the final unplayable boss could kind of be like Doom, like piloting an enhanced version of the Behemoth, like kind of like a Doom, like a Doctor Doom skin of the Behemoth, like like green and silver with like a big dumb metal helmet, um, and just swarming you with a combination of Doombots and dinosaurs. Anyway, yeah, that's there you go. That's the base roster. That's the base roster. Marvel vs. Capcom 4. I kind of blew through that. I guess when there's a lot of returning characters, I can kind of breeze through. Not a lot of having to justify myself. It's already loaded. Yeah, let me tell you what it's loaded with. So on the Capcom side, we got Ryu, Chun Li, and Kimberly from Street Fighter, Morgan and Jeddah from Darkstalkers. Marvel side, we got Captain America, Iron Man, and Hulk from the Avengers, Spider Man and Green Goblin from Spider Man. Capcom side, we got Leon, Dimitrescu, Wesk, Dimitrescu and Wesk, Dimitrescu and Wesker from Resident Evil, Regina from Dino Crisis, Frank West from Dead Rising. On the Marvel side, we got Doctor Strange, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel, and Ms. Marvel from the Avengers, and Thanos from fighting the Avengers a lot. Um, on the Capcom side, we got Dante and Nero from Devil May Cry, the Monster Hunter from Monster Hunter, Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins, and Phoenix Wright from Phoenix Wright. And then Marvel, we finally have some X-Men back. Wolverine, Storm and Magneto, Rocket Raccoon and Gamora from the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Capcom side, we got Mega Man, Zero, and Tron Bonne from various points of the Mega Man franchise. We got Strider Hiryu from Strider Hiryu. We got Falcon from Power Stone. Then on the Capcom side, we got Cyclops, Deadpool, and the Scarlet Witch from the X-Men. We got Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman from the Fantastic Four. And finally, big story character from the Capcom side is Ruby Hart. Big mini boss character from the Marvel side is Loki. Then Doctor Doom from the Fantastic Four and Behemoth from Exoprimal as the playable boss characters that merge somehow to form a unplayable final boss that's big and scary. And that is the base roster of 44 fucking characters. My my dudes. Now I'm gonna have to make myself very small. So that we can get DLC going. Hello. I hope you can still see me here on the bottom. All right, but yeah, now we have 3 seasons of 6 character DLC each. Um, so 18 more characters, and I guess I can show you guys cut content after that. And I think in reality, um, I could see I could see Capcom like starting with less characters in the base roster, but adding more characters than I do as DLC. So this might all happen in a different order, but I do think that the game ending with like 60 or 62 characters isn't out of the realm of possibility. Um, so yeah, why don't we begin? Why don't we begin the DLC? So the very first DLC character on the Marvel side. Now, I've turned the guidelines off to make space for everything, but I did say that I wanted to this roster to be a celebration of the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise. So, to celebrate the first game that Capcom and Marvel ever collaborated on, I think the first DLC character should be none other than the Punisher. And that is his art from the Punisher arcade game that is just recently re-released for the first time in the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. I think it's kind of a nod to Marvel and Capcom's history there. Punisher should absolutely be added to the roster in some form, and I think big guns, big guns and stuff. I think he could make a cool fighting game character. He could kind of fill in the gap that Chris Redfield has left behind because he's not in this roster. Yes, oh, we like the Punisher inclusion. Cool. Okay. Okay, okay. First character on the Capcom side is another cool character with a gun. Jill Valentine sporting her Resident Evil 3 look. Um and yeah, like having her come back, it's kind of the non-brainwashed version of herself. I think she could have a cool fun move set. And I think more Resident Evil representation is obviously going to be a no-brainer for Capcom to include. The next season 1 character, um and this we're going to, this DLC will obviously, like, the DLC is obviously like a great opportunity to bring back a lot of favorites. And one character I've seen the MVC community absolutely fawn over, absolutely adore, even though we haven't seen her since MVC 2, is Psylocke. Um, yeah, I think she's got a great character design. I think she's got a cool move set. And I think she's absolutely busted on so many MVC 2 tier lists and stuff, like I think yeah, I think people would absolutely spend extra money on her and they'd be excited to have her back. We got a Wahoo in the chat. Thank you for the Wahoo. You'd buy the DLC just for her, yeah. Nice. We've got a season 1 purchase. Excellent. Next on the Capcom side, adding a brand new character, adding a new character, hasn't been in a Marvel vs. Capcom game before, that I feel has gotten requested for MVC a lot, is Asura from Asura's Wrath. Yeah, he's got such an MVC ass moveset already. He's just never been in an MVC game. Um, Yeah, I wasn't really able to make room for him in the base roster, but I think he'd be cool DLC. Oh, and I guess I should reiterate again, real quick, uh, because some people weren't around when I said this before. Um, there are some characters where where I think instead of adding a new character, a completely new character, I think they'll do something called multiverse costumes, where they'll change a character's character model, give them a new voice actor, new voice lines, change some of their animations, and change the animation of their cinematic super, um, while keeping all of their gameplay the same. I think instead of making Miles Morales his own character, they'll make him like a multiverse costume for Spider-Man. Um, just reiterating that for people that have recently joined us. Ah, there we go. So Miles Morales will not be in the DLC. I don't want to disappoint anyone who thinks he might be. You're sending an angry letter. Is what I think Capcom would do. And I'll reiterate my reasoning is that Capcom is really big on like readability for people playing, right? Like they really want to make sure that people are not visually confused when they play the game. Um and I think that since Miles Morales and Spider-Man, like Miles Morales and Peter have such similar silhouettes, and because there's going to be a bunch of different colored costumes, like I feel like there's going to be situations where if Miles and Peter were different characters, uh in the heat of the moment players would not be able to tell them apart, and like they'd think Peter's on the screen, come up with a countermeasure against Peter, and it turns out to be Miles. Like that would be very frustrating for the player, and I think Capcom would inherently try to avoid situations like that. So instead, they'd make Miles a costume for Peter that plays exactly like him, but has a new super move, like has a new like cinematic super and all that stuff. I think that's the compromise they'd come up with, or the compromise they should come up with. Can't hashtag cancel Capcom. Hashtag Capcom is over party. Anyway, um, next Marvel character is not Miles, but is still, I think, would still be pretty exciting to get in a season pass. And this is us like branching out a bit more from from the primary Marvel franchises, right? Although this is also a marketing pick, but I think it'll also be exciting to people, and that's Blade. Uh, yeah, like it's kind of a shame that he's not on the base roster because I think Blade would be a great rival for Dante. But hey, they can interact uh after he comes out as DLC. I think he could have a great, like, really fun move set. Obviously, he's a pretty iconic character, and he needs to be in the game in some form. So I think finishing out the first season would be very exciting to a lot of people. Finishing out the first season on the Marvel side, I should say. A Capcom character finishes out the first season. And it's the same Capcom character that finished out the first season of the roster that I made most recently. But it's just such a Capcom move to do this. And it's Akuma. It's just what Capcom does. They put Akuma in these games, and they're especially going to put him in the next Marvel vs. Capcom game because of Akuma's history with Capcom's collaborations with Marvel. He was the first crossover character that Capcom and Marvel ever had. I actually just played as him last night in X-Men Children of the Atom, and his inclusion is actually very, like, kind of weird and sloppy but hey, he's history. He's a historical character. So yeah, they'd put him in as the big fun cool season 1 DLC finisher. And then season 2 would happen. First character of season 2 is Venom. Gotta have more Spider-Man characters, and yeah, Venom's kind of your guy for that. Um, he's got such a fun, cool move set in the MVC games, and he's obviously such like an iconic and like and beloved Marvel character. So so even though people he he was DLC in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, but no one bought the DLC in our Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, so it'll be fine to bring him back as DLC for this one. Oof. I'm almost done. I get to rest my voice soon. You just want to know Phoenix's reaction to Venom? Oh my god, that'd be amazing. Um Up next, a character that's never been in a Marvel vs. Capcom game before because they stopped making Marvel vs. Capcom games like shortly after he existed. Although he did exist when Infinite came out, and I feel like he would have been DLC for that if the game got to last longer. That's Rashid. Uh, Rashid's such a great fit for Marvel vs. Capcom. He's another Street Fighter character where I feel like they could really escalate and embellish his move set, and make him really fun to play as in a Marvel vs. Capcom game. So yeah, absolutely Rashid, easy peasy. Rashid Squeezy. Um and then another new character to versus Capcom from the Marvel side. Got another X-Men rep. Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Uh an X-Men character, but obviously mainly popularized by the Deadpool movies. Um yeah, I think this would partially kind of be a marketing pick, right? Um but like, yeah, I think she's got a great character design. I think she'd be a great fit for the MVC cast. Um and like, yeah, she could have a really cool move set, I think. Just she could have kind of a fun, she would be a firecracker. Yeah, just have like a fun like kind of straightforward like blasty move set like nuclear blast and stuff. She's also a telepath apparently. And it'd be cool to kind of like incorporate like counter moves into her shit. Um yeah, she's kind of both an X-Men rep and like a Deadpool rep, but yeah, I think she'd be a pretty cool DLC character. And it's good to have at least one more like brand new X-Men rep that wasn't in a previous Marvel vs. Capcom game. Uh Up next is a returning character from a Marvel vs. Capcom game on the Capcom side. San San. Ruby Hart was an original character made, was an original character who debuted in MVC2. So was San San. although she has kind of a legacy to her as the granddaughter of the original Sansan from the '80s arcade game. Um, yeah, since this game is a celebration of Marvel vs. Capcom history, I think it would be great to have another one of MVC2's original characters show up. And I love her. I love her design. Her moveset's really wacky and fun. Yeah, bring her back. Um, Fantastic Four is going to be a big deal for the next few years. So we gotta have at least one more Fantastic Four character. So here is. So here it is, but it's not. Um. Oh. One sec. Be funny if this is the one. It's funny. I may have neglected. I may have forgotten to put a character in OBS. Hopefully, this is an easy fix. Oh no. Okay. It's fixable. I can fix this during stream without taking up too much time. Um how are you guys liking the roster so far? How worried are you that I've fucked up and that your favorite character won't be in the roster? Okay. You're not too worried. You trust me mostly. Uh-oh. Um okay. We fixed it. It's in OBS. So the next Final Fantastic Four character is the Silver Surfer. Um instead of like yeah, instead of putting Thing or Johnny in the DLC, which I would do if I had like, you know, if I had like 6 to 10 more slots, yeah, I decided to kind of broaden the scope of Fantastic Four stuff. Um, and I think Silver Surfer would be a cool fighting game character. Um, Rumor has it that Silver Surfer was going to be put in MVC3, but due to technical difficulties, they had trouble like they had trouble with his board basically. Um, he wasn't included, so like um so they could finally put Silver Surfer in like a next gen game, you know, and and that way you have a couple members of the Fantastic Four, and you also have the Fantastic Four's main villain, and you also have kind of this anti-hero slash ally character for the Fantastic Four. Hits a broad range of Fantastic Four characters in the final roster. And you can have Girl Silver Surfer as like a multiverse costume, or vice versa. Make Girl Surfer the default, and make Boy Surfer the multiverse costume. You have options. That's all I'm saying. Um, and the last character for the second season of DLC on the Capcom side is Virgil. You gotta have Virgil. You gotta have Virgil. He Yeah, and he's a great pick for DLC. I know I do this a lot. I make Virgil the last character of a DLC season. I do it a lot. I promise that the last Capcom character will be a surprise. For season 3 will not be one of the same 3 Capcom DLC characters that I lead on. It'll be something new. But yeah, I do think that Virgil yeah, I think that Virgil will be an exciting pick for people that love versus Capcom games, and he's just a cool badass character with a neat moveset. All right, almost done with the whole roster, baby. Almost done. Gotta have Virgil TM. Gotta have Virgil TM. All right. So, starting off season 3, we've used the DLC to add more X-Men, we've used the DLC to add more Fantastic Four stuff, more Spider-Man characters. Got to add another Guardian of the Galaxy, and that's Star-Lord. Um yeah, he's never been in a Marvel vs. Capcom game before. I think it's pretty easy to give him like a cool new move set. Um and yeah, like I think Rocket, Gamora, and Star Lord would make for a good trio, you know. So yeah, kind of using him to kind of round out the Guardians roster, kind of flesh it out, makes the most sense. Um, for the Capcom side of the DLC, a celebration of the Marvel versus Capcom history is what this roster is. So you gotta have Captain Commando. You gotta bring him back. It's he needs to be here for this to be a proper nod to the history of Capcom, the history of Marvel versus Capcom. Um, and yeah, I think it'd be great and exciting to have him kind of squeeze into the last season of DLC. Need is a strong word. Look, not every character is gonna be for everyone. Okay. Speaking of which, this next character is also kind of an acquired taste, but this is also a character that's very important to the history of Marvel vs. Capcom. And this is a character that Capcom loves putting in Marvel vs. Capcom games, and the Capcom loves putting in Marvel vs. Capcom games, and Marvel hates it. But I think in order to kind of show that, hey, Marvel played really nice with Capcom for this roster, and we have this DLC character to prove it, is Shuma Gorath, uh, the funky little green weird tentacle man. They they keep putting him in Marvel superheroes and MVC2 and shit, MVC3. Capcom, like, Marvel pushed back almost every time. Uh so I think this would be a show of goodwill. It's true that they do just keep putting him in stuff, so this makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and as DLC 3, like, initially I had him as the very first DLC character, but I decided to have Punisher be that instead because I think that would be cooler. And I think it would also be very funny for Captain to be like, "You thought Shuma Gorath wasn't going to be in this game, but look at this. It's Shuma Gorath." Um Another fan favorite, long awaited returning character on the Capcom side, Batsu from Rival Schools. He's never actually been in Marvel vs. Capcom. He's only been in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and there is a dedicated fan base kind of clamoring for more Rival Schools. We're finally going to get Project Justice in the Capcom Fighting Collection too. So I think yeah, it makes a lot of sense to have Batsu be one of the last Capcom side DLC characters. And then we're down to the last two characters, and I think these last two will make kind of a big splash. The last Marvel character will be kind of a big, like, hey, this is for the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 fans. And this is our last X-Men character as an apology for not having any X-Men characters in Infinite. Cable. Cable was such a fan favorite, such a beloved character, such a top tier annoying character in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So I think as a nod to people really wanting to play as him again, they'll bring him back. They'll make him a little more balanced, but also still pretty annoying and still having like full screen laser beam supers. Um, and and yeah, he'll be kind of the last hurrah for Marvel DLC. No Rogue canceling your pre-order. Rogue, I want, like, again, this is what I think Capcom would do, right? If this was the what Daniel wants roster, Rogue would be in the base roster. But like I think the biggest draw of Rogue is giving her a special move that lets her steal the special moves of other characters. Realistically, Capcom is not going to put a character in the game that they will have to program 61 moves for based on her power steal move. Making you mad, Capcom, for virtually no reason, shaking your head. I'm sorry, just yeah, realistically, it would be like, yeah, Rogue would either have to be, if Rogue ever came back, it'd have to be in a game with a smaller roster, or it'd be without her power steal move, which would defeat a lot of the point of Rogue. So yeah, um, Rogue would Rogue would show up in Morgan's energy. Sorry, Rogue would show up in Morgan's ending, and they'd bond over uh being beings that steal life energy from other people. That's all I can offer you. I'm sorry. You accept your offer and you accept my offer and apology. Thank you. Phew. Okay, and the last Capcom DLC character. Now this is a weird deep cut, but I think um I think not everyone will really I think there's definitely gonna be people that like aren't super big on this as like the last DLC, but I do think that it would generate excitement for a lot of reasons. The last DLC character for the whole game, the last DLC character on the Capcom side, will be a character that's never been in a Marvel vs. Capcom game before, and a character that we haven't seen in a really long time, and that's Lin Kurosawa from the Alien vs. Predator arcade game uh, that Capcom developed. Um, Now, the reason this would be such a big deal is because there's a lot of history behind it. That history being that Lin Kurosawa was a very beloved character when Alien vs. Predator came out. A lot of people really resonated with her. And so Capcom kept trying to put her in new games. They wanted to make her a playable character in Cannon Spike. They wanted to put her, I think, in other versus Capcom games. But every time they tried, they were unable to uh, because there were rights issues with her being from an Alien versus Predator game. Technically, even though Capcom designed the character, Fox owns the rights to her, and they were never able to kind of clear that rights hurdle when trying to put her in other games. Fast forward to the 2020s, Fox is now owned by Disney, and Marvel is now owned by Disney. Um, which means that while Capcom is having like, discussions about which Marvel characters to include, they can be like, "Hey, you guys have the rights to a character we designed named Lin Kurosawa. Could we put her in this game?" And I think they would be able to talk to their 20th Century Studios lawyers and be like, "Yeah, actually that could work. We could do that." And they'd include Lin Kurosawa as one of the last characters as a really cool surprise. Yeah. So like a just a nod to Capcom's licensing history, I guess. And she'd have a cool move set. She's got like a cool sword and like, and guns, and she blows up eggs and stuff, and yeah. I've actually never played Alien versus Predator, but I have faith that they could make a really cool move set for her. And that's the only time I think that it would be feasible for Lin Kurosawa to show up in a versus Capcom game because Disney owns the rights to her. So it would probably only happen when Capcom is collaborating with Disney. But okay, here you go, guys. The full 62 character roster for Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, Spider Man, Green Goblin, Ryu, Chun Li, Kimberly, Morgan, Jeddah, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Thanos, Leon Kennedy, Dimitrescu, Wesker, Regina, Frank West, Wolverine, Storm, Magneto, Rocket Raccoon, Gamora, Dante, Nero, Monster Hunter, Arthur, Phoenix Wright, Cyclops, Deadpool, Scarlet Witch, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Mega Man Zero, Tron Bon, Strider Hiryu, Falcon from Power Stone, Loki, Doctor Doom, Ruby Heart, the Behemoth from Exoprimal, Punisher, Jill Valentine, Psylocke, Asura from Asura's Wrath, Blade, Akuma, Venom, Rashid, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Sansan, Silver Surfer, Virgil, Star Lord, Captain Commando, Shumagorath, Batsu, Cable, and Lin Kurosawa. There you go. This would be like after the game's out for like 4 or 5 years probably. But this would be your potentially final roster for the game. Now, like, I think I'm proud of this. I think I'm happy with this overall. Um, this was hard, and there were some choices I had to make. Uh, like I'm not like fully satisfied with this roster. There were some hard choices I had to make. And I can show you those hard choices. Uh, with like 7 characters worth of cut content. So you can kind of see you can see some of what I was going through. Um so yeah, here's the cut content. So first off, Beautiful Joe was almost in the final roster. I traded him out for Falcon at like the last minute basically. I think they have a lot of overlap. They shouldn't both be in the roster. Uh but I was sad to cut him. One thing you'll notice, one thing you might have noticed is that after the base roster, um, there are no Avengers in the DLC, and uh, and I think that's the biggest flaw of this roster. I think realistically, there's gonna be new Avengers characters peppered throughout the game's lifespan. Um, one of the uh, one of the DLC characters I almost included was She-Hulk. Um, but I just ended up prioritizing other characters and she fell off the list. Um, She-Hulk would have been a returning character. Um, a new character, like a newcomer that would be an Avengers rep that I almost added was Ant-Man, who I think would have a really fun move set and be really cool. Uh, but there were other DLC characters I decided were cooler. I think I ended up replacing him with Silver Surfer. Just because I think, you know, yeah, like 7 Avengers reps isn't nothing. Um, but 3 Fantastic Four reps instead of 4 is pretty small. So yeah, eventually I ran out of room for any Avengers slots. Um, on the Capcom side, uh, I almost put Cody in from from Street Fighter slash Final Fight. Um, I wanted a Final Fight rep to be in the roster, and I keep not including Hagar. Um, which is probably a little personal bias on my end, honestly. But I'm tired of Hagar being the Final Fight rep, and I'm tired of Hagar being like the token grappler in Marvel vs. Capcom games. I think they can do better. So I almost put Cody in, but I ran out of room. Um, another Marvel character I almost put in, but I just ran out of room. I think they'd be great, but I just didn't have the space. Was Ghost Rider. He's been great in the last couple Marvel vs. Capcom games, and I think he could continue to be great. Ghost Rider would slap. I agree, but yeah, I wanted to put Blade in. I wanted to put Punisher in. I didn't have room for Ghost Rider. Um, a character that was literally going to be in the roster when I started the stream and I made the last minute choice to swap out for Shumagorath. Shumagorath, I'd initially resigned, like, Shumagorath was initially DLC, and then I removed Shumagorath from the roster, and then while I was like saying this roster out loud, I realized no, Shumagorath needs to be in, just based off of all the history and stuff. Shumagorath needs to be in, and also if also Shumagorath is a returning character, and if I put this character in instead, Marvel would have too many more newcomers compared to Capcom. Um, so this character was literally like this morning, this character was going to be like 3 hours ago. This character was going to be in the final roster as season 3 DLC. Proxima Midnight. I uh I wanted more girls. I wanted more villain characters. And I thought one of Thanos's Black Order would be pretty cool as a fighting game character. I think her and like her magic spear or whatever would be like a pretty cool fighting game moveset. Um but the more I went on, the as I kept saying this roster out loud, I'm like, no, it's like Shumagorath needs to be in, and like also Marvel's enthusiasm for Thanos stuff is dying down. They're focusing on Thanos stuff less and less. So maybe they actually wouldn't put Proxima Midnight in, even though she'd be a great fighting game character. Um, so she was literally the last character that I cut from the final roster, and I did it in my head while I was telling you guys the roster. Uh, but the last content I have to share. That's fair, honestly. Yeah, it makes me sad though. I think she'd be cool. Um, the last content that I have to share is what my plan was before Avengers Doomsday got announced, and that was instead of Doom being the final boss, instead of Doom being the boss on the Marvel side, um, it was going to be Kang the Conqueror. Um, you know, I was going to have multiverse stuff be a big part of the story. Um, and uh Kang and Behemoth teaming up, um, with Behemoth opening up a bunch of different time portals, um, and Kang eventually getting control of Leviathan's AI, um, and kind of just using it to fuck a bunch of shit up, I think would have made for like a cool kind of final boss scenario. Um, and I kind of justified Kang the Conqueror, um, like like Jonathan Majors had already gotten fired when I was putting this roster together. um but I kind of justified it for like kind of two reasons. Or rather, I was still justifying it, and then two things happened. Right, one, they announced Avengers Doomsday after I decided that Kang the Conqueror was going to be the final boss. um and I was like, ah, fuck, maybe it's Doom. And then Capcom announced that a new Marvel vs. Capcom game doesn't exist yet, but it could if people buy the collection, right? I'm like, ah, fuck, like, because my assumption is that was that a new Marvel vs. Capcom game was potentially early in development, right? And if it was early in development, then maybe they maybe they put Kang on the roster before Jonathan Major got fired, and they're just locked into having Kang in the roster. But if they haven't started working on it yet, then there's no world where Doom isn't the boss, and they're just not going to bother with Kang. So I begrudgingly removed Kang from the roster, even though I do think he'd make a cool fighting game character. That would have been fun. Yeah, I think it would have been fun. But honestly, it's probably the right call to just like pretend Kang the Conqueror isn't a thing for a while. Like I understand them doing that, so I'm not too upset about it. But King would have been fun. But yeah, there you have it. There's all the cut content, and there's your full final roster. That's MVC4. It took me a long time to come up with this, and then it took me an even longer time to make all the assets for this and put it in OBS. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed. Um, you did enjoy. I'm glad. I'm glad. Yeah, and I hope anyone watching the VODs of this also enjoys. Um, yeah, yeah. This, I guess, this is kind of a culmination. Um, so, so yeah, I'm not gonna make rosters this big all the time. Usually I do like kind of cozier, more realistically sized rosters, but this felt like the occasion was like this warranted the occasion, you know. Um, yeah. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. That's gonna be the end of this stream. Um, versus Capcom rosters. We'll probably be back at some point. I have several more ideas for versus Capcom rosters. Um, but the next month or so is gonna be me playing and doing a bunch of things that that are finally like happening that I've been excited for a while. UFO 50 comes out next week. Metaphor Refantasio comes out next month. So I might not have time for more versus Capcom stuff for a little while. But if you liked this, if you like my versus Capcom rosters, pester me about it. It'll make it more likely for me to move that up and prioritize it. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. I'll be back on Monday with more Pokemon Legends Arceus, and then it's UFO 50 weekend after that. Friday and Saturday I'll be streaming as much UFO 50 as possible. Um yeah. Uh excuse me. That's that's it for the evening. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see ya. I'll see you. Have a good night.